Hi. How are y'all doing out there? Thank you all for having me here. Ani nindawe maganaduk. Nigagoy getamagas. Bine sikwe to go makwando dam. Gababani kagish kaniganing undunjaba oma a king. Grateful to be here. I live and work on the White Earth Reservation. I guess you heard that. I'm Bear Clan, Mississippi Band Anishinaabe, but I was raised in Oregon. I think some of you know that. I was raised in Ashland. And I just came just as a little, I just came from Ashland this morning, or Medford. But last night I went to see this play called Mannahatta. Have any of you seen that? That's at the Oregon Shakespearean Festival, and it's like it's so compelling and pertinent to what you're talking about today, but it's a Lenape story about Manhattan. But it's set against both the financial crisis of 2008 and the colonization crisis. So anyway, if you get a chance, get a look at it, or think about bringing it to Portland. And I also got to hang out with my mother. Some of you know her. That's Betty LaDuke. And she's a really great artist, so I got to hang out with the mom at 85, still busting my chops. As I thought about what to talk to you about today, I want to start with a couple of Anishinaabe principles or ideas, and one is Onishishin Ijichige. Onishishin Ijichige means to be beautiful. And I think that in the trying times that we are in, but in any times, that's what we should strive for, is to be beautiful. In our hearts, in our minds, in our prayers, and to remember that is, the part of the greatness of our opportunity. The other is this construct, which is Minopamataziwan, which is the Anishinaabe principle of really how you are to live. And I think about it because it is both it has a set of economic and political and governance teachings in it. But what it means, Minopamataziwan, is the good life. That's what it means, and that's what we strive to as individuals. And I think about this because I'm an economist by training. I think you might have got that, but in kind of the world, the discussions now, I think that our Minopamataziwan is kind of the equivalent to gross national happiness indexing. Do you know what I'm talking about? The gross national happiness indexing, where the fact is no matter how much money you have, you aren't necessarily happy. And in kind of repositioning ourselves in the opportunity that we have now, because of course crisis means opportunity, it is where we are going. And part of, you asked me to talk about indigenous rights and the context of teaching social justice. I think I'll be a little more broad than that, but let's just see how we do. But I wanted to talk about that context to start with. And as a parent, I've raised seven. I'm on my seventh child. Another one showed up about a year ago. Immaculate birth at 16. It was great. And I have to say, they've been to public schools, but most of them have been homeschooled. And some of them have been in the alternative learning schools. And so I'm kind of, like a lot of other parents, trying to figure out the best ways to impart what I understand and not surrender my children to an industrialized teaching system. And I know that is a challenge that many people face. And I'm so grateful to be speaking with you because you are the people who, have so much love for all of these children and give them so much. And so I'm glad to have this opportunity to spend a little time with you. So I have some pictures, and this is a painting I actually have, but this idea of where we are going. I'm not going to talk just about historical indigenous teachings and thinking, but the question I have is where are we going to be? Where are we going to be 100 years from now? Where are we going to be 50 years from now? What will we be thinking? Where will our water come from? What are we going to be eating? Where's our energy going to come from? How are we going to treat each other? And those questions are indigenous questions, but those are really questions about where we're all going. And in our teachings as Anishinaabe people, this is an old guy from my reservation. His name is Nagani Benes, and he's at this moment in time, which I think we all are. In our prophecies as Anishinaabe people, we're told that This time is called the time of the seventh fire. And in this time, we're told that we will have a choice between two paths, or two mikana. That's what our prophets told us a long time ago. And they said, in those two paths, one path will be well-worn, but it will be scorched. And the other path will not be well-worn, and it will be green. And it will be our choice upon which path to embark. And to me, that is really definitely not just our situation as Anishinaabe. We're at this moment in time. And I'm going to talk about that and how you make that choice to a path of more of survival. But this guy, he's an old dude from our community, and he's looking out his window and he sees some wind turbines. So this is where I live, Gawawi Egamug. I live on Round Lake in the middle of my reservation. And I just want to say, so that's a little bit of my language. It's Algonquin language. But in that, like this month in our language is called Benakwe Ogisis, which means the leaves falling moon. Leaves falling moon, and it is followed by a moon, which is Gashkaden Ogisis, the freezing over moon. Manitou Gisis Soons, the little spirit moon. Gishi Manitou Gisis, the great spirit moon. A moon of Onabana Gisis is the hard-crusted snow moon. That's around March. I always like that, Onabana Gisis, but it's also the moon you don't want to do a face plant in the snow. You know what I mean? You understand when it freezes and thaws the snow? You are familiar with snow, I know. It's Portland, but Iskigami Gisis, which is our maple syruping moon, Wabagana Gisis, flowers, Odamina Gisis, strawberry moon, Mean Gisis, blueberry moon, and Menominake Gisis, our wild rice making moon. Those are the moons in our Anishinaabe calendar from my territory. It is different land here, different territory, but I thought you might like to hear a little bit of that. And I think that maybe you noticed, I'm hoping that you noticed that none of those moons, nothing is named after a Roman emperor. Y'all got that, right? It's possible to have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with empire. You'll be okay. We'll all be okay, as a matter of fact. It'll be good. It'll be great. This is my territory. This is a couple of my relatives out harvesting wild rice in the middle of my territory. This is our territory as well. This is wild rice. Looks like a pasture, but it's thousands of acres of wild rice on Lower Rice Lake, which is like the mother lode of wild rice in our territory. And you know, I like this picture because say that you live in a place and you harvest wild rice from the same lake for 10,000 years. Now there's probably some pretty good teachings in that about how to hang out in the future, right? That's what a sustainable economy looks like, and that's that's me and one of my good sisters, Dawn Goodwin. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story of my territory. This is our territory today. We're facing this big pipeline called Line 3. And I'm going to get back to that a little bit, but we didn't really have nothing to do with pipelines in our territory. We're a little bit like Oregon. We don't have a lot of fossil fuels. But in the midst of this, we have a proposed pipeline through our territory, which is proposing to bring 915,000 barrels a day of tar sands through the middle to the heart of the Great Lakes. And previous to this, we had another pipeline proposed, which is called the Sandpiper. And that was a 640,000 barrel a day fracked oil pipeline to come from North Dakota, which we fought for 3 years. And in 2016, the Enbridge Corporation, a Canadian company, announced the cancellation of this pipeline. So my idea of making America great is when America had 50 million buffalo. You know what I mean? That's kind of, and you know, when we had 50 million buffalo and they lived on 250 species of grass in the northern plains. And those 250 species of grass represented tremendous biodiversity. And I don't know if you've ever seen a buffalo in the wintertime, but they can like dig down, they go like this. And they don't need hay. That's my point. They can eat, you know, today we got 28 million cattle in the same territory. Making America great, I think about 1,000 varieties of corn. That's when America was great, kind of in my thinking. I mean, and you know, just so y'all know, like nobody was slacking over here. We was busy developing these corn varieties and working on all those varieties. And one day, like you'll see some pictures later on, I'm a corn grower, but I was growing this pink corn because I really like pink corn. And this guy said, you should grow blue corn. And I was like, no, you should grow blue corn. There's like 8,000 varieties, pick a color. You know what I'm saying? But that's like tremendous, and that's like before Monsanto and Syngenta, right? Those are corn that are developed by a lot of our ancestors. I mean, corn doesn't exist in nature, it exists as teosinte, adapted by indigenous women largely from Central America and Mexico. And I think that's when America was great again. America was great when there were so many salmon that you could walk on their backs across the river. America was great when the skies were blackened by the birds and the flocks of birds. That's when America was great. And America was great when northern Minnesota was full of wild rice in the territory that we are. We are a people that are facing this time where, I refer to this time as this time when this scorched path has begun. And this moment in time that, as Eduardo Galeano would say, in the colonial to neo-colonial alchemy, food changes to scrap metal and food to poison. Gold changes to scrap metal and food to poison. We have become painfully aware of the mortality of wealth which nature bestows and imperialism appropriates. Each generation, it is something new which comes. And we enter this era now which I refer to as Wendigo economics, the economics of a cannibal. And part of the teachings and the opportunity that you have as those who impart knowledge to young people is to begin the process of kind of deconstructing the paradigm of an American education. That is really your opportunity and your privilege. I went all the way through school with Keynesian economics, and then I was like, hey, that's really not working out for most of us, is it? Maybe it's time to take a different look. And in this world that we live in, as a young woman, even at Harvard University, if you wanted to study the art from Europe, you went to the fine arts department. If you wanted to study the art from indigenous peoples, you went to anthropology. And so what I will say is something that is that the valuation of knowledge is not equal. And that our knowledge as indigenous peoples of this territory or of this territory here is not valued in most educational institutions from kindergarten on up. And it is now the time, there's really no time like the present to open our minds and to see where we are going. So now I'm going to tell you kind of a little bit of where we are and a little bit of where I think we are going and what that means in terms of an education. And the question to me is how are we teaching our children to survive? What will they know? Not only will they have open minds and hearts, but will they actually be able to grow food? That's something I think about. My father, he came to see me when I was a young woman at Harvard University, and he said, Winona, you're a really smart young woman, but I don't want to hear your philosophy if you can't grow corn. And so that is kind of the question I have to all of us, is how are we teaching this next generation to survive? And how are they going to in the times ahead? So this is our territory. I'm going to tell you about our little experiential education we have and where we are now. I told you about these pipelines. In 2013, the Enbridge Corporation announced a pipeline known as the Sandpiper, which was intended to bring fracked oil from North Dakota fracking fields across to Superior, the furthest inland port in the heart of Enbridge's pipeline empire. And a lot of you might know a little bit about me. I've spent a lot of my adult life fighting stupid projects. And that's what they are. They're just like a bunch of stupid projects. And there's always a number in Oregon and everywhere else that come up. And you're like, wow, do you really think that's going to work out for anybody? No, it's not going to work out. And so you spend your time trying to challenge these things. And we didn't really know nothing about pipelines. And I'm like the rest of you. Pipelines were underground and out of sight. And all of a sudden they announced this new one. And this new one is going to go, rather than a corridor that is all full of 6 old pipelines, it's going to cross down to this new territory. And that new territory is full of our best wild rice lakes, including that one I showed you. So we went out and started informing our people and educating our people. I brushed up on trying to figure out how to explain pipeline economics and pipelines to my community. And then we decided we should go out and start educating and informing non-Indian people, because my theory is that if you could get a lot of Norwegians mad, you'd have a much better shot at defeating a pipeline. And so that's what we did. We built a multiracial alliance of a lot of grassroots people, a lot of northern Minnesota is full of a lot of people who own lakeshore homes. And so this is, it's like, we built this multiracial alliance, and between 2013 and 2016, we filed lawsuits, did a lot of community education, learned a lot about pipeline economics, oil and water, barrels per day, CO2 that comes from barrels per day. You understand what I'm saying? Is like all the math that is associated with pipeline economics and what I refer to as Wendigo economics, the economics of a cannibal. And in 2016, as I said, the Enbridge Corporation announced the cancellation of that pipeline known as the Sandpiper. And then and we were like all really happy. And as I said before, it's possible to defeat a big pipeline project. But what that company did is that company went out and moved to North Dakota and purchased 1/3 of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so at this moment that we are in, which is a moment when civil society in this country is being tested, and it is tested against the reality of climate change, we find that there is no moment like the present to move our people a little bit forward. So in the picture that I am at in the idea of the scorched path, this is kind of where we are at now in climate change related disasters. And I believe that Hurricane Michael is predicted to cost between about $20 billion. And I'm not sure who's gonna pay for all of this in the future. I'm not sure, they're predicting that by 2020, we'll be spending 20% of world GDP on climate change related disasters. By 2020, that's like 2 years from now, right? And I'm not absolutely sure how that's gonna happen, but what I'm sure of is that it's expensive and getting worse. And the scorched path is more and more, more and more us. This could be Portland, or this could be, Eastern Oregon. This is Fort McMurray fires of a couple of years ago. And this is what happens to your civil society in the crisis of both climate change and fossil fuels. So we defeated the Sandpiper in 2013, and then we turned around and the Enbridge Corporation bought 1/3 of the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now I know a lot of you probably went to Standing Rock. Am I right that a lot of people from Portland went to Standing Rock? Raise your hand if you went out to Standing Rock. Wait, come on, don't tell me that nobody in this room went to Standing Rock. Okay, good, thank you. And I know a lot of you supported us at Standing Rock, but when we went out to Standing Rock, this is what we saw. And this is a woman being sprayed with something by the police that are defending the Energy Transfer Partners Dakota Access Pipeline. And this is what it looks like when civil society breaks down. And we're all increasingly familiar with this in the country, and not only during the Trump era, but this was actually during the Obama era. So don't think that this was actually just a Trump problem, but this is the problem when the rights of corporations supersede the rights of individuals. And that's what has happened in civil society. Not that it's actually new in this country, because the rights of corporations have already done pretty well, over the years in this country. But in the present time, to me, this is somewhat of a Selma moment in the, not in the environmental movement and in the indigenous rights movement. This is like one of my favorite epic pictures. I really want to be one of those guys, I worked on it. This year I did get to stand on a horse. But to me, it is like, these moments in time where you see courage, you see some pretty damn courageous people. And sometimes I think that in the biggest crises that are around us, we have this opportunity to be our best. And that's, to me, a lot of what Standing Rock has been about. This is in Minnesota. This is the battle against both Line 3 and the battle against the Sandpiper. This is what it looks like in Minnesota at present. And this was me about 2 weeks ago. As I mentioned, in the big pictures of pipeline politics, what I would say is that about a year ago, there was 5 pipelines that were proposed. Because as you know, or you may not know, Canada, they got that guy Justin Trudeau up there that everybody thinks is like so sweet, but he's really not. Canada is like a really dysfunctional economy, and what I mean is their entire economy is predicated pretty much on mining and tar sands, which means that 75% of the world's mining corporations are Canadian. Most of the human rights violations that occur in Mexico and Central America are financed by Canadian corporations. And the tar sands is Canada's plan for the future. And in their plan for the future, they need a way to get that landlocked oil out to market. Because about 90% of the petrodollar is based, or a good portion of their foreign exchange is based on their tar sands. And so in saying that, there were a number of proposals. There was one for a there was the Kinder Morgan proposal, and y'all saw what happened to that, right? About a month ago, I think it was about a month ago, that's a proposal to bring it from Alberta to over by Vancouver. And about a month ago, the court in Canada ruled that all of the permits were nullified because they had not done consultation with the First Nations. It was a huge victory for all of us. The Enbridge Gateway proposal, Northern Gateway proposal, was canned by the National Energy Board about a year ago. The Energy East proposal that they had to get their oil to market on the East Coast was canceled about a year ago, leaving two pipelines left. One is called the Keystone Pipeline. Y'all remember that one, the KXL, right? And the second is called the Enbridge Line 3. And the Keystone proposal is, I don't know if that's going to go, but it may. They don't have any shippers. And a pipeline without shippers is less likely to actually go. But the proposal that is the biggest proposal right now is Line 3. And what happened is that after a 3-year battle against this pipeline, where every regulatory agency in the state of Minnesota ruled against this pipeline because it was a bad idea for Minnesota and a bad idea economically and environmentally, in June of this year, the Public Utilities Commission rejected all of those recommendations and approved permits for this pipeline. And at the same time, the last day in the hearings, what I saw happen was, I'm sitting there in the hearings in the Public Utilities Commission, we just watched things kind of like unravel, civil society unravel in front of us. And one of the Public Utilities Commissioners turned to the Enbridge Corporation and said, if we are going to approve this pipeline, will you pay for the police costs? Really interesting question when a state asks a Canadian corporation, a foreign multinational, if they're going to underwrite the police for a pipeline. And the reason that this is a pretty big, that I consider this a big question in civil society is that, to start with. And the second is that for those of us who are at Standing Rock, we know that $38 million was spent on police at Standing Rock. So it's an expensive proposition. But these were the first arrests. People ask why I was so happy. That's because I was for 4 hours trying to get myself arrested. I don't know, most of you have probably been tried to get arrested before, right? A number of you, right? So I'm standing there like, if you're gonna get arrested, you should chain yourself to some church people. That's like my theory. So I was with some church people, like downtown Bemidji, right downtown, we blocked the main street. And this is Kevin Whalen from MN350 saying, it's not such a big deal, LaDuke. You just got yourself charged with disorderly conduct, so why are you so excited? But I was there for 4 hours, and they were really trying to not arrest us, and they'd say we're gonna come in an hour, maybe 45 minutes, can you guys all move on? And then finally they came in lockdown, and I was I was just trying to get home for dinner, and everybody's like, how come you could wait so long? And I said, because I wore Depends. So just keep that in mind. If you're teaching NVDA, teach the use of Depends, and some of you can have the organic cloth diaper thing. That's all good for adults. It's all good. But I'm saying, I don't know how to tell you to teach Indigenous politics but there's so many ways in all of your classrooms, And I learned that from my pal at RAN, Rainforest Action Network. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is something that you already know, which is that all around us, the world that we know is changing. It is changing from the fact that, you no longer will see butterflies, and you will see that there is an insect Armageddon. And I'm not sure how smart it was to have all those pesticides, because in the end, someone needs to eat those little bugs. Those little fish need to eat those little bugs, and they're part of a food chain. We have an insect Armageddon. We have, catastrophes of biblical proportions. Whether it is the fires or whether it is the flooding or it is the hurricanes. We do not know. We are seeing the crash and decline of species after species, and we all are in fear, having read, of course, the UN report on climate change and the situation that we are in. So my feeling is no time like the present to begin the Renaissance. And that's what I think of it as. You know, there in the larger construct of where we are at, there's been a lot of marginalizing of our thinking. And I refuse to be marginalized. Like, for instance, I don't think of it as alternative energy. I think of it as enlightened energy. You know, enlightened power. Because why would you want to run around in a vehicle? You know, the combustion engine in your car is about 16% efficient. And an electric engine in your vehicle is 65% efficient. So what kind of dumb people would want to run around with a 16% efficient vehicle? You understand what I'm saying, right? So the enlightenment would be kind of the moving forward. I also don't like to be, you know, not only do I not like to be called the alternative, but we were talking earlier about the resistance. I don't consider myself part of the resistance, I consider myself part of the Renaissance. You know, at that time when you must bring that rebirth. And in our teachings, we have this prophecy where you make a choice between two paths. As I said, one path they say is well-worn, but it is scorched. The other path is not well-worn and it is green. And so, you know, I was asked in a foundation interview here like a couple of weeks ago what my theory of change was. You know how they always ask those like really profound political questions like, what's your theory of change and stuff like that. And you gotta answer right if you're gonna get the money, I guess, I don't know. So I said, my theory of change is couched in my prophecies that say you gotta make a choice between one path or the other. And so we are making this path and we refer to this as the eighth fire, lighting the eighth fire. So in the big picture that I look at though, I think, you know, there are different plans for our future. There are different plans for our future. And there is the Trump plan, you know, which I'm not gonna think is gonna work out well for any of us, even the 1% in the end, because we all drink the water. We all breathe the air, and we all are gonna live here, even some of the 1% if they don't head to Mars on those planes with Richard Branson. But I refer to this as the Sitting Bull plan. It's kind of the equivalent to the new Marshall Plan. And that is to me part of, you know, what we must teach is, you know, what Sitting Bull said, one of our greatest political thinkers, is that we must bring our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. And so that is a little bit of what this plan is and what my thinking is of where we are and how we think about the future. And in saying that, you know, I mean, you are all pretty smart people or you wouldn't be here. I mean, I'm not saying just here, but at this conference. You know, and in that, you know that indigenous thinking of sustainability has not only to do with, you know, whether it is how you harvest and how you pray, but institutions like governance. I mean, you all know that when your founding fathers or those founding fathers tried to figure out what kind of government to make, they had no experience with real democracy. You know, they came from feudalism, they came from monarchy, and they came from oppression. And they looked around, and Ben Franklin and those guys went up to see the Iroquois Confederacy. And they said, hey, what you guys got going on? In their like old way that they would say that. You know, and they sat there in long houses with representational governments. And they took notes on how you built a confederacy of nations after a time of bitter wars between those nations where they had buried their hatchet under the tree of peace. They took good notes, but not really good notes. And they went back and they had some big omissions like that peace thing, that would be one. You know, and then another omission was, of course, that which you know, which is, in the Iroquois Confederacy, it is the clan mothers who appoint and remove the chiefs. I also think quite often about the term condolence in their governance system. They say condoling a new chief when you bring them on. And I have, talked to I've talked to people about it, but I think about that. And first, usually when you are condoling, bringing in a new leader, condoling both involves the loss of the leadership of the previous leader, but the other thing is that when you condole, when you bring in a leader, you're thinking about the significance of the responsibility of leadership. You know, the weight that you have as your community to take care of so many people and the burden that puts on families and on the hearts of leaders, who must have a skin that is seven skins deep. That's what they told me. And so I think about that. Now that would be a really great teaching for American democracy, right? Both the teachings that, women's right to vote, we didn't get that for a while, but second is that leaders are those who are responsible. They should be condoled. in there. Teachings in our system are systems like reciprocal justice and restorative justice. The ideas in this country that a punitive system where you can keep putting people in prison and build an economy based on a prison industrial complex is really not only a linear economic model, but it's something that's really not sustainable. And systems where, like, one of the best cases of that is the case of a case on the Pine Ridge Reservation, or on the Rosebud Reservation, of Crow Dog versus Spotted Tail. And what had happened is that Crow Dog in the 1880s had killed Spotted Tail on their reservation. And the Lakota system of justice said that the Crow Dog family had to care for the Spotted Tail family then, because they had lost their hunter. They had lost that person who provided for their family. A punitive system of justice, of course, puts Crow Dog away. And so I think about what you really want over the long term, and as if you're going to hang out for a long time, you're going to want to figure out a restorative system of justice, not a punitive system of justice. Our teachings of how you live in an economic system, are simple. I talked about the idea of Minobamata Ziwan, but within that there are teachings, for instance, that the Creator's law is the highest law, higher than the laws made by nation states or municipalities, and one would do well to live in accordance with the Creator's law. We have teachings that in Dinaway Muganatuck we are all related, whether we have wings or fins or roots or paws, and those relatives should be cared for, and we are only part. We have a teaching and an understanding that that which is around us is mostly animate and alive, and should be treated with reciprocity and gratitude. And I think about that, and I think about, like, in our language, the word asin, the word for stone, is an animate noun. It's an animate noun. I think about our teaching and our deliberation that in each deliberation, you should consider the impact upon the 7th generation from now. In each deliberation. One time I said that when I was giving a lecture in Ohio, and someone said, that's really radical, and I said, no, that's really conservative. If you actually spent a while, figure out what you're doing now, and figure out how that would roll out a long time from now, you'd be making a lot less stupid decisions, right? And so part of what I think about is the implications of indigenous teachings for this broader society, kind of that are not in just an ethnic studies department. So in that, instead of understanding that the Creator's law is the highest laws, we live in, and you all teach, or forced to teach, regulatory systems and governance systems in the United States which don't understand that. Instead, we think that man can make clever laws like change recommended daily allowances of radiation, which is what I believe Trump just did, right? Change the, allocate water in Western water basins until there is no water for the salmon. You can change recommended daily allowances of pollutants, but you will not deal with the fact that we are all drinking the water in the end. And so as clever as we are, in the end, as you watch Hurricane Michael, you know that the Creator's law is a greater law, and one would do well to live in accordance. Instead of understanding that we are all related, even in a classroom setting and across the board, there is always a teaching of compartmentalizing things. Instead of understanding that in Dinaway Muganatuck we are all related. And as I came here, and I will speak of it again at the end, these insects came to me, and I thought how unusual that is in the time of Armageddon, that in the middle of an airport, an Asabakeshi, a spider, should drop upon me. I thought that was so unusual because there used to be many more of them, and you all know that, and there are so few now. And she came to me, and I thought of the teachings of Spider-Woman and the webs that we have around us and how to remake strong webs, whether they are webs of food, whether they are webs of energy or webs of relationship. And Dinaway Muganatuck, instead of understanding that we make decisions for the 7th generation from now, in this election year, most people are making decisions on how it's going to work out for them now or how it's going to look. 2 years, or even, we do school years or fiscal years, instead of the long-term planning. So I feel that there is no moment like the present to consider these teachings of how we bring our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. the Sitting Bull plan. So let me tell you a little bit about how we apply this knowledge in my community to the best of my ability. You know, I told you, so I spend a lot of time, way too much time fighting pipelines, but I'm actually, you know, more interested in farming, you know, in my community. But this is my village. This is the village that I live in, and it is a picture, a snapshot of the scorched path. This is a snapshot from a film called The Seventh Fire. And in that film, which is kind of like, I don't know what you call it, like poverty porn or something, where they take a picture of your community in the middle of a meth epidemic. And, you know, it's not to say that that is not accurate, because I have so many deaths and overdoses in my community, but that situation is not unique to me. You know, it is across America. It is in every corner. Well, this is what it looked like one day in my village, and that's what it looks like. Not most days, but that's the housing project. And so we looked at that. We didn't really like how we felt about that. And so we decided we should make some changes in that. And so we began some work. And so we decided that we was going to make Onishishin. You heard me say at the beginning, we was going to make it beautiful. Now, someone's probably going to get a PhD on studying our village, but I was inspired by Balmy Alley. Y'all know where that is in San Francisco? It's in the Mission. And if you go down this one alley, there's all these garages that are painted differently. And I said, what if we took the village that nothing ever trickles down to and made it beautiful? Like, what would happen? Would that change us? You know, and I don't have the full answer, and no one's done their PhD on this study, you know, on studying my village, but this is what we're doing. So my daughter calls these the mean girls. I don't really know them as the mean girls. They're pretty nice to me, but this is all tagged up, you know? And then we decided to do this. That's pretty nice, huh? We decided to make our village a little bit more beautiful and just try to see what we could do to change things. That's an artist named Anthony Sewell. He's from California. And then we decided to do something really cool in our village, which is put solar thermal panels on our houses. I don't know, I think you can do that in Portland. It's kind of, you know, like Germany and stuff with a lot of fog. But in Minnesota and a lot of our territory, we are cold as hell, but we got sun in winter. And so it turns out you can put those solar thermal panels on and you can save about 25% of your heating bill. And which in an era of fuel poverty, which is extreme, in a fossil fuel era of the when the economy is controlled by the vagaries of the fossil fuel market, it's a good thing to have a shot at some kind of fuel security. As my ancestors discussed, you know, where you make this choice between two paths, and then we must light this fire in our teachings, which is known as the eighth fire. But that's on us to be those cells. And it is on us to remember that we're just part of this, like in Dinaway Maganatuk, as I said at the beginning. We are relatives. We are relatives. And that relative is perhaps one of the greatest teachers in her moment where she hangs on with such peril. But I know every little school has a monarch recovery program, right? And Pollinators Project. But in this, there is something which is to make the Renaissance. To make the Renaissance. To take a breath. To be beautiful. To make the Renaissance and to make the change. So this is kind of my last picture. And I just want to say this is, you saw our art earlier, right? This is art in downtown Duluth. And I don't know how to make change. You know, you do all kinds of things to make a change. But somehow in this moment, we have to give ourselves permission to find our courage. And to make the changes that are necessary for our children to survive. And those are changes that are based on our spiritual wealth, you know, drawing on that wellspring, reaffirming our beauty, and making beauty around us in the face of what is very ugly, because I live in the same world you do. You know, so the more we reaffirm that, the stronger and more beautiful we are. So this is a painting, and she's in downtown Duluth. And you know, you saw the pictures at the beginning of our battle on the pipeline. You know, I'm going home to a brutal battle when I return. We will see what happens this spring as our lawyers do everything they legally can to stop this pipeline. We have a decent shot. we have a decent shot because Minnesota is the state between Wisconsin and North Dakota. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's kind of the deep north. That's how we refer to it, but we're a little bit better in Minnesota. So we have a chance. But you know, I am now preparing for a full-scale ground war this spring. And so it didn't look like, it only looked like this one sister here got to go to Standing Rock. But I want to say for the rest of you, if you missed your opportunity to go to Standing Rock, you can come to Minnesota this summer and join us. Camping is good. And we have 300 miles of pipeline that has not been built. We have 68,000 people who testified against it, and the vast majority of Minnesotans who do not support it, and half of a pipeline that is on public lands. And I consider myself, when last I checked, a member of the public. And so we will see how it goes, but this is a water protector. And you know, I've been thinking about this construct of being a water protector because I'm a water protector. And I think a lot of you are as well. I have this like secret idea that we should take over the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. Sometimes I think they're a little outmoded, you know what I mean? Some good skill sets, maybe a little less American flag stuff would be helpful. You know, I'm a patriot. I'm totally a patriot. But I'm a patriot to a land. I'm not a patriot to a flag. But this is a water protector. This is what they look like. And so Native women often go missing in Duluth. And we're not seen. But this, she's 40 by 60. And she's in downtown Duluth on 2nd and 2nd. So I don't know how to make change or how to bring indigenous thinking into facets of education, but all I can tell you is our story. And how, you know, when you see that woman, you remember how beautiful you are and we are. And you remember what it is to be a water protector. And you remember that, you know, this is the time of our renaissance and the time to make our future. Thank you for your time.